Hey everybody, welcome back to Listography. Jason, Kramzer, and Joe here, back for another episode of Albums of the Year, and today we are talking about 1971. 1971, another big year. There were a ton of great records to pick from in 70, and I think in 71 there might be even more. I don't know about these guys, but probably gets my vote for the best year of all time.
I'm with you, 100%.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. There's even books that have been written about it. I found a book called Never a Dull Moment, 1971, The Year That Rock Exploded by David Hepworth. He argues that it's the best year ever. He talks about how a lot of artists were on 2-year contracts and they were just pumping out music. They were just going with their gut, not really overthinking it, recording whenever they could on tour, and just cranking out great music at an unprecedented pace. Record sales were exploding. The record companies couldn't really even keep up with the demand, and they didn't really have any control over what the artists were putting out because they just needed to get the goods out there. So just so many people doing so many creative things, and just so many great records being made. I mean, at the very end of 70, David Bowie releases The Man Who Sold the World. Then he records Hunky Dory and releases it in 71. And before the year's over, he's already recorded all but one track of Ziggy Stardust. So just that's the kind of pace that all these artists are working on, and they're all sort of peaking at the same time. So I'm very interested to see what you guys got on your lists. Kramzer, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, Jason, it was so hard for this year. I'm not going to start talking about the albums that I cut because this video will be 35 minutes long if I do that. So my runners-up is essentially a Mount Rushmore of classic rock. David Bowie, Hunky Dory, Rolling Stones, Sticky Fingers, The Who, Who's Next, and Led Zeppelin 4. But the best album of 1971 is Teaser and the Firecat by Cat Stevens.
Super.
One of my favorite records of all time. It is incredibly lush with poetry, simple poetry, really. Just kind of got like this sweet, buttery goodness. It's kind of about this tale for children, and it plays like that. It's like a nursery rhyme. It's really innocent and childish. It just like kind of unfolds like a storybook. It starts with the wind and goes into Ruby Love. I love the way he plays acoustic guitar. Got like this percussive calypso element to it where you don't need drums at all. There's so much beat without ever having to have, I mean, there's some parts with a little bit of percussion, but he doesn't need it. He's got one of the best acoustic atmospheres I've ever heard, and it's all over here. It's loud without being noisy. It's delicate at the same time. It's not very intellectual. It's very just kind of straight up and sincere. And I just think it's really good pop folk. Some of the little ways he says some words, or even just like a syllable in a word is so just delicate and wistful. It's absolutely incredible. One of my all-time favorite songs, How Can I Tell You, is on here. Bitter Blue is a lot of fun. Peace Train, Moonshadow. I'm kind of a sucker for folk. I just kind of like the message that it sends. I think a lot of folk music is kind of grabbing you by the hand and just taking you on a slow walk. And that's what this feels like to me. It's just a really beautiful record. So a lot of really great hard rock going on this year, but to me, this is the standout. Yeah, my favorite album of 1971, Teaser and the Firecat.
Well, that's the most surprising thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I'll be honest. Not expecting that ever. No, I would have guessed 1,000 different albums before I would have settled on that one. You basically already named my entire list, Kramzer, because this is the greatest year in rock and roll history. I'll just go with the runners-up because, again, there's probably 10 albums on here that would make my top 100 albums of all time, and I won't be able to get to talk about 5 of them. So we'll just have to soldier on. My runners-up this year, we got another Beach Boys classic, Surf's Up, featuring maybe my favorite Beach Boys and what I think is maybe the most beautiful song ever written outside of Beethoven in Surf's Up, the title track. Any other year, it's number 1. Another runner-up for me is going to be Hunky Dory, David Bowie's, his first, I think, real great album. Life on Mars, Changes, Oh You Pretty Things, incredible, kind of weird, the start of David Bowie's kind of ascendance. Sticky Fingers by Rolling Stones, by far my favorite Rolling Stones album. I think it's their best. I think it's better than Exile on Main Street. It's just them, like, super bluesy, but still rocking really hard. Another killer album, could be number one any other year. And then we got two of the greatest rock and roll albums of all time. Kind of just who am I going to pick for number one? So I got to put Who's Next as the runner-up. Maybe the most consistent Who album. Just no theatrical elements, no rock operas, just straight up rock and roll. Incredible performances all around. You have Bob O'Reilly, My Wife, personal favorite. Won't Get Fooled Again. It's full of just ridiculous tracks, all-time classics. But number one's going to be Zeppelin 4. It's one of the greatest rock and roll albums of all time, one of the best Zeppelin albums, most people's favorite. I think it kind of takes everything they've done in their entire career and just sort of makes it a little bit better. You have the folk elements of Going to California, Battle of Evermore, that I think is just another step up from what they'd done on Zeppelin 3. You have When the Levee Breaks, just apocalyptic blues. I think their best reworking of a classic blues standard. Just one of my all-time favorite songs. Stairway to Heaven, kind of got funkiness with Misty Mountain Hop and Four Sticks. Black Dog, Rock and Roll. You can hear all these songs on the radio, probably in the same day. And I think it's just it is maybe, their most concise and just kind of perfect album all the way through. There's no filler or weak tracks or missteps or weird experiments. It's just them at their peak, just hammering away at some of rock and roll's all-time great songs. So Zeppelin 4, it's kind of an easy, I feel like it's almost too easy of a pick, but I had to go with it.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, Jason. Joe and I were talking before the release of this video, and like so many of these picks are just so obvious, and we felt like lame about it, but there's like 25 obvious ones for 71, so it's hard.
I get that. But neither of you named any records that are on my list. As great as all those records are, and they are great, and as ridiculous as the rest of the year is, this was actually a pretty easy list for me. There's 5 records that I just absolutely love, that are just personal favorites. There's no way that any of those other classics would even touch them. So I pretty much had these 5 set in stone from the very beginning. So I'll get into them. No particular order for the runners-up. But the fourth one is going to be Brighter Later by Nick Drake. A lot of people probably prefer Pink Moon. This is actually my favorite Nick Drake record. I love all the sort of extra instrumentation on this record. I think it's gorgeous. And then I've got Ram by Paul and Linda McCartney. This, I know All Things Must Pass won for 70, but this is actually my favorite Beatles solo record. I think this is one of the only Beatles solo records that really hangs with the best Beatles material. I think it's as good as pretty much anything that the Beatles did. I think it's an amazing record. Also, I have, after a few years off of my top 5, he returns with Nielsen Schmilsen by Harry Nilsson. Just a really great kind of Beatles-esque pop record. Definitely his most commercially successful record, with songs like Jump Into the Fire and Lime in the Coconut. But the whole thing front to back is just little pop gems, and I think it's fantastic. Then I have a record that I think a lot of people, maybe in the last 5 years or so, are kind of rediscovering and realizing how great it is. I've got Songs for Beginners by Graham Nash, an amazing record. I like this record more than any Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young record, more than any Neil Young record. This is my favorite thing that anyone in that camp has ever released. It is a brilliant record. If you don't know it, go back and check it out. It is phenomenal. And then on paper, I thought it was going to be super hard to decide which of these 5 to put at number 1. But when I actually went through and listened to them consecutively, it was a pretty easy choice. My favorite record of 1971 is Runt, The Ballad of Todd Rundgren by Todd Rundgren. This comes out right before his big, well-known, commercially successful double album, Something Anything, which is probably a little more varied. And this one is just a little simpler, pretty much your basic early 70s singer-songwriter record. There's a few songs that rock out a little, but mostly it's just piano ballads, but it's just some of the most well-written songs that you'll ever hear. And I love his voice on these early records, just crystal clear, kind of angelic, and it's just a great record. I love it.
Very nice. It's so hard as three guys that really dig prog. No Love for the Fragile by Yes or Aqualung. It sounds like a good book, actually. I mean, it's 71. Wow. Also, the year Winona Ryder was born, so a hell of a year.
Indeed it was. And I think maybe things get a little easier, but not much coming up in 72 and 73. I'm excited. I hope you guys are all excited to tune in and see what we pick. We will see you next time. Until then, make sure you like the videos if you enjoy them. Hit subscribe, hit the bell so they get notifications. And we will see you in 1972.